Alright, so the other really fun thing you can do with this candle scene, if you're so inclined, is adding some environmental fog. And this one probably is going to make my render laggy, so again, I'll sort of do my best to talk you through exactly what's happening. So if we go into your render settings, and it's pretty much the same deal for Redshift, except this it's in a different spot. But under the Arnold Renderer tab, there's an Environment tab, and then there's two different settings under that Environment tab: Atmosphere and Background Legacy. So if you want like fog in your scene, you're working on like some kind of weird, murky, foggy swamp or something weird, you can use the Atmosphere tab. Background Legacy is like an old version of this. Anything with legacy next to it is basically like, hey, this is an old way of calculating stuff. It's going to be gone in newer versions of Maya. It might already be gone. I'm working in 2018, so it might already be gone by now. Who knows? So I'm going to go in and just click on this little mapping thing next to the Atmosphere tab. And I'm just going to go ahead. There's AI Fog and Atmosphere Volume. So they both do kind of different things. Atmosphere Volume, excuse me. I sort of interpret that as more like overall mist. Just sort of like the air is sort of like smoky and cloudy. It's like a sort of uniform texture, I guess, but it does a really nice job of affecting the lighting and such. AI Fog is more if you'd want like a dense mat of fog on the ground, or, some kind of weird like miasma floating in the air at like a very specific height. So they both do similar things, like I said. I'm just going to go with the AI Atmosphere Volume, and you should be able, like for some reason, there's no great way I've found to actually access this without going into your Hypershade. So what I'm going to do is go into my Hypershade, like I said, and I'm actually going to do an edit, delete unused nodes, because I had a previous one I was playing around with. So here's my candle scene from before. No idea what my voice is doing, sorry. I just click on this AI Atmosphere Volume. What is happening to me? Alright, so click on that AI Atmosphere Volume, and you'll see that then you have some settings you can adjust. And by default, it's pretty much turned off, so it doesn't really affect your scene. So this is our basic sort of candle scene that we have. As soon as we start turning density up on this, you'll see that it is making this really aggressive fog look, where basically it is being treated as fog, where you have a bright light. So if you had like a street lamp, this would be a great way to get that effect. But basically what's happening is the light is sort of bouncing around the scene. It's making a literal fog, where the light is coming from this candle, hitting the fog, and bouncing off of other little fog particles, to make this really crazy glowing effect. And there's different settings that you can mess with for this, like in this case, so turning up density is basically going to be, if you turn it up enough, it's just going to make super dense fog, basically. That's going to be extremely diffusing of the light. The attenuation is the setting where usually it'll sort of like, you can sort of take back some of the density. So basically what happens is the light bounces around. My understanding of it is the light bounces around less. So you still have a really dense fog. The light is just not traveling as far in the fog because it sort of stops being bounced around faster. That was a weird, redundant way to describe that. But you can use these to make some pretty interesting effects. Like I said, great for street lamps. You can turn the fog a weird color if you're so inclined. This is going to sort of compound with whatever color your light is. And then you can also, like I said, if you're trying to figure out like what exactly, what exactly is happening in your scene, you can mess with the different colors of things. And in this case, the attenuation actually makes things more confusing, which is kind of funny. If we set that to black, you can kind of see a little bit where it's like the orange light is coming back, but honestly, I'm not sure why exactly that decided to make the green so much more intense. It was pretty weird. So a lot of times for me personally, like playing with color is kind of a crapshoot with this. I honestly don't, I should use it more, but I don't use it enough to be like, ah yes, this is definitely what this color is going to do. So I usually just sort of click on things until it does something. And then setting it back to white is pretty much the default of, it's just going to grab whatever your light color is doing, kind of run with that. And there's also other stuff you can play with, like anisotropy, which again, gives you, in this case, like a pretty nice little bubble around your light. Most of these, I'm not gonna lie, I do just sort of play with them. Like I just put them in and I'm like, cool, let's see what this does, ha ha ha. But I do like it. It is nice again for like that little bit of crazy sort of, just like that little glow around the light, right? Like that, see like little, just, it's super, super subtle, but it looks really nice, like just those little rings around the light. And it will take a little bit longer to render this, but like depending on the effect, I do think it's worth it a lot of times to throw that in. So the other thing we want to look at for this is, and this is where stuff gets like real gross with the environmental fogs, is with sampling. Once again, it's just going to take a while to sample this stuff. I've not found a super great way around that, unfortunately. I am going to, excuse me. I'm going to go in my wax really quick and turn that. If we go under matte, I'm just going to do enable matte. It'll make the renders go a little faster for now. So now my candle is just black. It's just not going to render the subsurface scattering. So in this case, let's do this, turn off progressive refinement, and see what we got. So this is, again, I'm looking at specifically like the samples in this fog. So we could go into our AI atmosphere and be like, cool, maybe we need like 8 samples in here, question mark. And there's a few different places that you can play with settings for this. In this case, I don't think that made a huge difference. Out of curiosity, I want to see what one sample looks like. The answer is very bad. I'm going to go ahead and set this up to like 3. Cool. Let's see where that gets us for now. There is also settings for sampling in the individual lights themselves. And we have 2 lights in this scene that could theoretically be affecting things. So one is the light on the walls. And actually, now I'm curious, I've never really paid attention to this before, but if we go into light linking, I'm curious if that AI fog, yeah, no, okay, cool. I was curious if the AI fog showed up as like something you could just turn it off. But you'll notice that if we go in to the light itself, in addition to the just regular sampling for diffuse and stuff, we also have volume samples. So theoretically, we could actually do a few things to this. So we could go in and we could be like, all right, this is just going to have no effect on the volume whatsoever. So you can, for a given light, basically just be like, hey, don't affect volume stuff, or only affect it a little bit. And that's pretty handy, especially if you are trying to optimize render times. But what we want to do is try setting the volume samples for that particular light up a little bit higher. And you'll notice that once we set that to 5, it does get like kind of nicer looking. I'll try 8 because I'm feeling spazzy. Try 12. But yeah, so I mean, it's just kind of one of those things where it's like you got to go through and like play with the settings to see what gets you the best settings. So in this case, like I said, I did turn down the samples in my atmospheres. Like, what if we set these back up to 5 and see how that interacts with sort of rest of the settings. And the other thing you can do for sampling, it did make a little bit better. So the other thing you can do is go into your render settings, oh lord, and you can look at the volume indirect samples here, and this is just going to adjust like, hey, add more samples to all of the lights that are affecting environmental fog. And a lot of times I feel like I have to set these up higher than I would want to, honestly. Oh wow, that's annoying. Apparently it was just my anisotropy setting that was like, hey, you like grain? Because I like grain too. Or now it's just not rendering. I'm not entirely sure what's happening here, and it's irritating me. What? What did I do? Why is it suddenly not rendering my fog? Question mark. Very strange. Alright, well, I don't know exactly what I did there, to be perfectly honest. Cool. You gonna... it's so much easier to just like be like, oh cool, this is a finely rendered like you just see the chunks rendered. But yeah, so I mean, mess with the settings. This does seem to be a little bit less crazy looking. And again, you can also go in and set more samples for the particular fog itself that you're working with. I'm curious what 9 will do. And this does, like I said, increase render times, but what's the point of rendering something if it looks really sketchy? Is just kind of my 2 cents. Like, it's, like, there's so much stuff that I feel like could be used as really cool portfolio pieces, but it just, you just sort of can't because, you know, they're super sampley or just, like, otherwise there's, like, technical flaws that, like, detract from the overall look of the, oh, I meant 07, that detract from the overall look of the piece. So in this case, I mean, you can see this changes the render pretty darn dramatically by adding this fog in. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna get off a render of this, and if you want to stay and see how that looked compared to the original render, I will show you guys that. I will find, while this is rendering, the actual original render that I had, which for some reason I'm just saving in a folder full of freelance stuff, which doesn't make sense, but there we are. I'm a crazy person. Cool. So this is the original render with no fog, and this is the new render with fog. In this case, I don't really like the fog that I added. I think it looks pretty weird. But just to give you guys an idea of the sort of different effects you can get. So I mean, this, I like, again, if you're doing like some kind of weird, you know, misty swamp or like pirate captain chamber or something like that, it does a pretty nice sort of murky effect. Oh shoot, I forgot to turn on the... I set my stupid thing to be a matte, and I need to make it not a matte, and I'm just an idiot, and I forgot to do that. Yay, what if you don't be a matte? And what if you render again, but this time with subsurface scattering? I was like, why does the candle look so different? It's the little things. Did I close that? No, I didn't. Okay. Anyway, hopefully that looks a little bit nicer, I guess. Other option there would have been for me to just re-render that one area and comp it over top of the other image, but I don't feel like opening Photoshop. I'm lazy. But yeah, so that's the AI environmental fog. Or I'm sorry, no, that's the AI atmosphere, not the environmental fog. I've lost my mind. And the candle looks a little bit nicer now. One reason the candle is maybe a little bit glowier than it looked 2 seconds ago in the render is because you have the subsurface scattering coming through the light, so that's also affecting the fog itself. Like the light is basically bouncing out of the candle and going back into the fog. So it is going to be a little bit brighter by the candle. But we do get that nice sort of glow. Misty candle glow. So I actually don't know, I like the background better on this one, but I think the sort of glow by the light is nice on that one. But yeah, I'll just sort of let these render. Nothing else is happening. I have no other useful input for this. If you enjoy rendering, hang around. If not, wander away. Cool. My cat is passed out on my lap, just being very, very lazy. Were I into editing these videos dramatically, I would take a picture of him and put him in, just casually floating across the screen, but effort. You will notice this is taking much longer to render because of this environmental fog, but if you want the effect, it's a kind of gotta suck it up. There's also other weird sort of procedural ways, not really procedural ways, but there's other ways to sort of fake environmental fog, basically. Not so much for light interacting with it, but for, you know, if you want like just sort of fog and then the farther away from the camera, like the fog gets denser so it occludes more of your vision. You can do stuff like that, sort of procedurally with like depth maps and things. That is later problems video, but there are ways to sort of cheat this where you can do a lot of this in post, and you don't need to spend, you know, 50 billion years rendering everything. Wow, I cranked some of those settings up really high. I kind of regret doing that. Anyway, cough. Takes forever to render. But yes. Let's see, do I have any other interesting commentary? Probably not. My cat is shedding all over my computer, and there's just like a solid layer of hair on everything. It's really gross. Very unfortunate. Every time I say unfortunate, I get "You Poor Unfortunate Souls" from The Little Mermaid stuck in my head, which is weird because I haven't heard that song in like 10 years. And I kind of always... Actually, no, that's a lie. I would be lying if I said I hated that song. That was one of the best songs in the movie. Good lord. Everything's rendered except this stupid corner here. Go faster. Faster! You will also notice the fog sort of does... it bounces more light into these shadows here. I've not changed any of my shadow settings, and that is... It's not really a brighter shadow per se. It's just a little bit... like there's more... Light is bouncing through the fog and making the fog brighter, and the fog is sort of... Hey, it's done! And the fog is sort of looking... I was going to say looking fancy, but the fog is basically brightening the shadows sort of artificially. Volume fog. Cool. That's volume fog. This is... Oh god, what am I doing? This is not volume fog, so yay, difference.